state is a fiercely competitive and ruthless society. Misery and triumph.
And now, After Hours with Rixx Javix.
Welcome to After Hours with Rixx Javix. I'm your host, Rixx Javix, coming to you from the darkest reaches of low-security space, live from the Stay Frosty Lounge. Grab a cold drink, light a cigar, and let's talk. Hang on a second. All right, just say something.
This is Alan Mathison with Rixx Javix.
All right, you're coming through great. So, for those out there in the Eve world and the Eve community who don't know who Alan is, well, you introduce yourself.
Well, hi, the rest of New Eden. Alan is a oldish character. Started out in YC 112. Flies with Startide Industries. It's a smallish but growing industry corp that literally just made the jump into nullsec this last week. Now part of the ULI Federation. So we're getting a little bit interested with that. It was actually an interesting aspect to me getting started. We'll find out what I do in real life has something to do with space. So I always thought that Eve was going to be, if I ever got involved in any MMO, it was going to be Eve. And what was interesting is that I managed to get the client installed on my Linux machines at that point. Wow. And started. At that point, they had dropped support for Linux.
Right.
They had originally had it, but they dropped it. I started, and I got partway through the tutorial, wanted to do exploration, and I lost the probes. Couldn't figure out how to get the probes back.
Right.
And I just stopped. Okay, that was the end of it. Then about 4 years later, something came out about 6-8 months after the Battle of BTAC-R. And one of my friends on Facebook said, posted this magazine article. And I said, yeah, I tried that, but it didn't work out. And he said to me, give it another try. They've made a lot of improvement on the user interface. And they had, and I did. And 4 years later, through several corporations, including Eve, Eve University, and Mixed Group, I'm still here. I've had jobs and relationships that have actually gone less time-wise than Eve.
Yeah.
So it's actually pretty amazing.
Wow. So how many years has it been since you started playing then?
Well, you're taking a look at starting it in 2012.
Right,
So there we go.
Excellent.
But really, honestly, it's 4.
Right,
really. If you really want to be practical about it. And it's been an amazing 4 years.
Wow. Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah. Excellent. And so I think a lot of people probably are wondering, why it is you're on. So tell us a little bit about what you do in real life then that sort of ties into the upcoming project, the new Project Discovery for this year. Yeah,
exactly. Why the hell is it me here?
Not that industry in Eve isn't interesting and fascinating, but what is it? Yeah.
We'll get back to it, I'm sure.
Okay.
But the meat of the interview is this. We were all there, or certainly a good bit of us were there when Dr. Mayer announced that the next phase of Project Discovery was going to dealing with exoplanets.
Right.
Now, when I was young, and honestly, Rex, when you were young, we had 9 planets, and that was it. And astronomers back then really felt that there was a whole bunch of other planets out there, but we had no idea how we were ever going to figure out actually if there were or not. We couldn't figure out how we would ever actually find them. Well, now, of course, we know that we have a couple of very good ways of finding them. And what's nice is that I've spent the last 10 years working with a great organization, pro-am organization called, long name here, the American Association of Variable Star Observers, AAVSO, that is an organization of both amateur and professional astronomers dedicated to observing variable stars, that vary in brightness in the sky for any of several dozen different reasons, including the fact that there are planets going across the surface transit of the star. Exactly what Dr. Mayer described. So I've been dealing with this. One way or the other, supporting it and supporting astronomers doing this for the last 10 years.
Right. Wow. That's pretty exciting. I mean, in a non-exciting sort of way. I mean, it's not adventure-y, but yes, it's very exciting, though.
Oh yeah, it was adventure-y. Being there, seeing the data come in on some of these stars and some of the planets, and knowing what they were able to find and why they were able to find it.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that, and you were absolutely right. I mean, there was a time when we didn't know of any, exoplanets or planets outside of our own solar, and not just around other stars, but also in our own little group here. Our own little solar system seems to be growing by leaps and bounds every day. I think it was just a week or so ago where I read an article about a couple of more, those, what do they call them? The planets that are way, way out there. There may be 2 or 3 more that are of a size that we can detect. It's amazing how fast our own solar system has grown in complexity. But it's always interesting to me. It's like right around the time where a lot of articles will come out and say, "Are there even any other planets?" We've not found any. So, and then all of a sudden we start, and now there's literally thousands of them that we know about.
Little over 4,000 confirmed.
Yeah, that's insane.
As of today. Yep. And what's really more insane? Think about this. All of the exoplanets we've discovered, all of them, we have discovered via solar systems whose edges are edge-on to the Earth. So think about this. Take a stack of CDs and throw them into the air, and then time freeze them right there, and then just take a look at the CDs in the air frozen. How many of those CDs will be edge-on to you? How many of them will be flat or 45 degrees edge-on to you? Only the ones edge-on to you via the methods we now use are applicable to find planets around. We could have hundreds of thousands more, but if the solar system is not edge-on to us, we don't know.
Right. I mean, that's a really good analogy to how small a fraction of what we're able to observe is actually is counted in those 4,000 or so that we know about. Because I mean, I think that even as a kid, growing up reading science fiction and being interested in science, I mean, if somebody had asked, I think that, for the most part, a lot of us felt that pretty much every star is going to have planets around it, at least of the same class as our sun, right? I mean, that's a good supposition. I think red giants, maybe not, and neutron stars, who knows, but the planets, the suns that are in our class, I mean, certainly probably have planets around them.
Well, that was a good guess, but we had no way of knowing whether it was true or not. Now, what's interesting is that Dr. Mayer didn't discover the first exoplanet. He discovered the third or the fourth, depending on how you count it. The first exoplanets were discovered around pulsars. There's no reason why they can't be discovered around pulsars. A pulsar is simply an old dead star. Dr. Mayer found the first exoplanet around a sun-like star.
Okay. Wow. That's pretty exciting. I mean, imagine that. Imagine being fortunate enough to be there at the right time to do that, or come up with a technique for doing that. And that's pretty exciting. So
figuring it out, and figuring it out, and getting to a point where the detection ability was just good enough to be able to do that. There are two ways of really discovering exoplanets right now, and Dr. Mayer talked about it. He used the transiting method. This planet would go across the surface of the star and cause the star to dip. It really causes the star to dip really, really slightly.
Right.
How slightly?
Very slightly.
How slightly? Let's talk about seeing a ladybug as it goes across the surface of a searchlight. I'm not kidding.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the problem in the early days, and I mean, I don't know a ton about this, but I do keep track of it because I'm a science nerd too. But that was the early days. Those planets that were being detected were huge. I mean, these were yes. Jupiter sized or bigger objects.
Yeah, and they were being discovered that way because they were being discovered via the Doppler spectroscopy way.
Right.
Those planets, at least at that point in time, were not going across the face of the sun. How we were discovering those were that we were watching the star that they were orbiting wiggle.
Oh,
and
right.
Every star does that.
Right.
And if you can see it for yourself or imagine it for yourself by imagining yourself whirling a yo-yo around your head.
Right.
You whirl the yo-yo, and the yo-yo goes crazy around your head. But as you whirl the yo-yo, watch your hand. Your hand is not still. It is circumscribing a small circle that is keeping the yo-yo in orbit.
Right.
The suns do the same thing. And we were discovering huge planets via this method because the huge planets were really yanking the sun's chain.
Right. The gravity interaction between those two objects was having an effect on both their orbits. So that change in orbit was causing a Doppler shift in the light spectrum.
Yep,
yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And what was fascinating about that is that we were discovering planets all over the place where these huge gas giants were in orbit like one day around their sun. And we look at our solar system and we go, okay, all the rocky planets are in the center. Then out towards the outer areas, we have the gas giants. And with just one thing to take a look at, that was how we did planetology. That's how we thought solar systems formed.
Right.
Now we're looking at everything that we're finding there, and that really caused a revolution in trying to figure out how solar systems formed. Because we've got a whole bunch of data here that says, well, sometimes you can, have Jupiter or something 10 times the size of Jupiter closer than orbit Mercury.
Right, and right up against the star in some cases. They're insanely hot. Well, there's another thing too. Is I think it is the Kepler satellite, right? Is it Kepler? Mm-hmm. Is the satellite that's helping now too? That's in orbit. Yeah.
Kepler's the big one.
Yeah.
Kepler's the big famous one right now. Yes.
Right. So that's helping too. That's something that's outside the atmosphere, which is also another problem.
Yes.
Because we're looking through the atmosphere at these stars, so the light shifts affected by the density or the whatever of the atmosphere that's got to look through. So that makes it even more difficult.
Oh, much more so. But what's interesting there is that the atmosphere is how telescopes look through the atmosphere is exactly how you look through a pool. If you go down to the bottom of the pool and look up, you see everything. You see your friend looking at you from the side of the pool, but he is waving and he's just distorted like all hell. The stars work the same way. What's interesting is that we have now learned how to compensate for that distortion by changing the mirrors in real time on telescopes on the ground, so that they phase out the atmospheric distortion. We've now gotten to a point where we can do that so well that we can get resolution on the ground nearly better than the old Hubble Space Telescope.
Wow, amazing! That is amazing. Yep. Yeah, and then I'm sure there's probably post-processing that can go on too, using computers and algorithms and things that would even help that even more. So the group that you're involved with, the long acronym, the name of it, but that's kind of a crowdsourcing thing too, right?
Well, I was with an old colleague Saturday, as a matter of fact,
Right.
and she called it the original crowdsourcing.
Okay.
And we've actually done crowdsourcing,
Right.
but crowdsourcing in the modern sense.
Right.
But yeah, it can be called crowdsourcing because what we have are thousands of 2,000 or 3,000 members,
Wow.
and observers all over the world, and what they do are take a look at specific stars, any stars they're interested in, and figure out how bright is that star tonight. That's called photometry. And they take an estimate of how bright the star is right then, and they then put that in our database. And that makes a light curve. That makes a curve that is how bright the star is over time. We have 110 years of these light curves. And the AVSO maintains the largest database of photometric data in the world. And it's used by both amateur and professional astronomers.
Wow.
And the variable stars along those lines are interesting in one interesting way. I'll just give you one example. When astronomers say, for example, that the Andromeda Galaxy is 2 million light years away, how do we know that? Did we take a yardstick and go 1, 2, 3? Usually not.
Right.
There's a special class of variable star called Cepheid Variables, whose rate of variation is directly tied to exactly how really bright they are. So if it's a really, really bright Cepheid variable, it will vary in time quickly. If it's a dim Cepheid variable, it will vary in time slowly. And so what's interesting here is that if you look at stars in space, it's like you're in a fog bank. If you see two stars that are of equal brightness in the sky, you don't know whether they're really together. You don't know whether they're at the same distance. Or if one is like a 100-watt light bulb 10 feet away and a 1,000-watt light bulb 100 feet away. But if the 1,000-watt light bulb blinked at 50 times a second and the 100-watt light bulb blinked at 1 time a second, you would know, oh, that one's 10 times less bright than the other one. They look the same brightness, so that means that the other one is 100 times farther away.
Right.
This is exactly what happened with someone in the late 1800s who found a bunch of these Cepheid variables in the Andromeda Galaxy, did the science, and helped figure out the darn thing was 2 million light years away.
Wow.
Amazing. It was a woman who did that too.
Yeah. That's so incredible.
Henrietta Leavitt didn't get the credit. We're trying to change that.
Yeah, there's been quite a few of those sort of things that have happened that recently are starting to come to light. And I think that's all well and good. I'm all for revisionist history when it benefits those who have been forgotten. Not so much when it's used to falsify things. But in this case,
well, revisionist history when it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. Now we have a little bit of that here in Pittsburgh with the Allegheny Observatory. I helped create a documentary about the Allegheny Observatory a few years back with a friend who was the producer and director of it, and I just helped here and there with some ideas and support and movie posters and marketing and things. But the story of the Allegheny Observatory goes back, with Brashear and Langley and spectrography was born at the Allegheny Observatory, and the study of the spectrum of light that came from stars, and then what's his name, George Gatewood. George Gatewood.
Oh, Gatewood.
Gatewood. I think it's Gatewood. Back in the early 70s, like 70, 71, somewhere like that, started doing exactly what you're saying. He started a program for looking for exoplanets at the Allegheny Observatory. So that's a little bit of a little local history that sort of that I know about. But it's pretty fascinating stuff, really.
Oh yeah, exactly. It was just. It was interesting to be a part of that. It was fascinating to me to find out that you had something to do with that film, because if I remember correctly, it was initially debuted at an amateur astronomical convention in Vermont called Stellafane.
Oh, really?
And and I was there for that initial screening.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah.
I had no idea you were part. That was 3 or 4 years before I got into Eve, and then you'd mentioned this during His Holiness's interview.
Okay, all right. I talked about it then.
Oh my God! My God!
Forgotten giants of the Allegheny Observatory.
Yep,
And
yep.
the premiere was held at the Heinz History Center here in Pittsburgh, and the head of the Smithsonian and Neil deGrasse Tyson was there, so that was pretty exciting. Yeah, it's a nice little film, a little forgotten stuff. I love that. You start digging into things, and everything starts to become connected, especially in science. It's like everybody's standing on the shoulders of giants that came before them, but that whole one connection leads to another connection leads to another. It's pretty fascinating. There's really
it's pretty important too.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely.
It's critical because one thing leads to another, and it doesn't even have to lead to another in the same field. That's how you know that that kind of web density gives the whole concept across the web credence.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, obviously, last year we did some protein work, crowdsourcing in Eve.
Yes.
How do you feel about this? Is this going to be valuable? Is this actual valuable science that Eve players are going to be doing this year for Project Discovery? I think it's pretty cool.
Yes, it's going to be. There are a couple of ways of doing this, and a couple of organizations that are helping out with this. What's interesting is that these kind of initiatives and the need for these kind of initiatives, whether they're, study at home on the computer or Universe Today, going on the computer and taking a look at images that way, they're going to grow exponentially because our data inflow is growing exponentially. Just like a fire hose. We've now gotten to a point where we are getting real data in, so quickly and so fast that the people getting the data have absolutely no hope of actually really going through it. So we have a whole bunch of scientific organizations going, please take a look at our data, please.
Right.
Please.
I know it's insane to me that, there's even, things today where, like NASA's every once in a while we'll release a new image from Pluto, from the flyby of Pluto. Mm-hmm. And that was like over a year ago, and they're just getting around to, they're still not finished, figuring out all the different images that they got just from that, from that flyby. And I've been involved in the Mars one a little bit. I haven't had as much time lately, but last year I did a little bit of that where citizen scientists had access to the archive of images that Mars Surveyor is taking, and which is literally, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of images. Like, I think 99% of Mars has been photographed in high resolution at this point.
Yes.
And, excuse me. And basically, you could just log on to this archive and download images and just start looking through them. And if you see anything of interest, there's a way to make notes and things of that. So I've done some of that too, but because there's just no way. There's so much data now that there's no way that a human being in their entire lifetime is going to be able to go through it all.
No, exactly. And sometimes, I'm not going to remember the names here, but sometimes you're going to find a real gem, a real life, and I'm not going to remember names, but a real life, version of Caroline Starr happened in space. Right. And it was just one of these school kids taking a look at images and going, that doesn't look right. And then showing it to the teacher, showing it up the chain. And no, it didn't look right. And now I'm not going to their names, but it's called, this person's object.
Right. Wow. Yeah, you never know.
And the other thing is, what we're doing here, what we're doing in Eve, etc., with the citizen science, that's called data mining.
Right.
And what's interesting is that you can take a group of images and use them for their intended purpose. But then they can actually be looked at again for a completely different purpose and still extract some interesting science out of it.
Well, that's interesting.
Well, for an example there, at one point in time, about 4 or 5 years ago now, I was taking variable star images with a robotic telescope. And the telescope did not direct correctly. And so I got an image of not the star that I wanted to see. So I'm taking a look at this and I'm going, okay, well, it's not the star that I wanted, but what data, what science can I get from this image? So I figured out what stars were in the sky, and okay, here we go. What was it? Andromeda, I think. And I took the data and I went and put it into our database. There were no other points in the database for this star. This is a 100-year-old database. I'm going, okay, wait a second. It's R Andromeda. We know it's a variable star. What the hell? And so I put it in, and then I'm thinking, okay, we got our robotic telescope network. This is a great project for this network. I got, I took a 2-minute CCD exposure, and I'd gotten the thing. And so I went up to my director, and I said, I got a great project for the scope. This star. And of course, my director, he knew exactly what star it was. He's going, no, and that's going to take a 20-minute integration. I went, what do you mean 20-minute integration? I got this out of 2-minute exposure. And he looks at me, he breaks into a grin. First time that it ever happened, and said, yeah, but what were your error bars? And just the error that I had in that observation was incredible, because what I didn't know at the time is that I was looking at a 17th magnitude star that was 2 million light years away in the Andromeda galaxy.
Right.
And so, my director said to me, well, data mine this. Take a look at old magazines, etc., and see if you can, trace out a light curve, put it in the database. And I actually did that to some degree, and found some data from an astronomer in an old Soviet magazine, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
So now those points are data mined into our database. And the next part of that project, which I haven't done yet, is to go to a whole bunch of people who usually photograph the Andromeda galaxy looking for nova. They photograph and look at the Andromeda galaxy to see if any of the stars are going nova or supernova.
Right.
And their images, they didn't care, but their images are going to have our Andromeda on them.
Right.
And I will take their images, extract the geometry of that star, and link from the light curve in the database.
Wow.
So images can be reused for very different purposes.
Sure. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, because there's no wasted data. I mean, really, unless it's, it's all observable. So once it's been recorded, there's got to be some value to even a mistake, right? I mean, you never know. I mean, history's full of that, right? The happy accident where, the scientist is looking for one thing but finds another. I mean, goodness, I think, some of our planets were discovered that way, right? So, yeah. You never know what you're going to find.
Well, I think Arthur C. Clarke said it best. He said the most interesting exhortation in science isn't eureka; it's that's funny.
Right. Yeah, that's not supposed to do that.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, we were talking about pulsars earlier, because that's how pulsars happen. Remember, originally, people were all excited because they thought it might be an alien signal. That was, because they couldn't figure out what the heck that was all about. So that's how pulsars were first discovered through radio waves. Yep.
And let's see, we had gamma ray bursters. That caused a different type of excitement during the Cold War. They thought Russia was potentially doing airburst testing.
Right.
And gamma ray bursters, the astronomers had to security to head OPSEC gamma ray boosters for 5-8 years, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
Until they finally were able to convince these guys, no, this is happening several hundred million light years away. It's not Russia, really.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. So do you think that the information that's gotten out of, at the end of all of this Project Discovery, at the end of the year, whenever we're done with it, is going to be valuable?
I think it's going to be very valuable. I think it's going to be as valuable as anything else, and I think that very, very good work and good science is going to come out of it. What's interesting to me, given Mayer's talk, is that there didn't seem to be an endpoint for this. He was mentioning first taking a look at the CORAT data, which is a French space telescope that was active between 2007 and 2013. It's important to realize that everything that we were looking at in Project Discovery, nothing of what we're looking at is in real time. It is old data, but that doesn't mean it's bad data. Apparently the first things you're going to be taking a look at are from CORAT, which was active 2007 and 2013. And then he said, all right, the second one we're going to be taking a look at is the very, very famous Kepler data. And then he mentioned TESS. TESS hasn't launched yet. It's scheduled to be launched in March of 2018. So he was thinking about the future.
Wow.
And there are a whole bunch of missions on tap that could tap into the algorithms and procedures that Project Discovery is going to use.
Right. So this could be
depending on what CCP wants to do. This could be going on for a good while, and it wouldn't surprise me if it did, because what surprised me to begin with is they started with biology. Not that biology is bad, but I was going, okay, cells, and they did it wonderfully. They worked it in magnificently. But I was going, cells, and so this is more to in keeping with Eve as a space game.
Oh, sure. Yes.
So who knows? I think there's going to be good data. I think they have very good metrics. You'll remember that Mayer was taking a look at the CORAT data and saying, based on what they had found so far and the data that they had gotten, they suspect that there's between 6 and 12, if I remember correctly, stars that still should be in that data hiding. And so that's what we're going to find. Right.
And I honestly, I wouldn't put it past Eve nerds to find it pretty quickly, because they kind of they definitely overdid it on the last one, and I suspect this was probably going to capture the imagination a little bit even more so, looking for extra exoplanets, and like you said, I mean, that's right up our alley. So
yeah.
You're probably going to get people who are going to be doing this one who maybe have passed on the last one.
Yeah, that's possible. And I people are more used to, maybe this is my bias. It could be my bias. Sure. But I think people are more used to crowdsourced space type things. It could be my bias. I could have a whole bunch of people belonging to the ornithology lab at Cornell now that are starting to drive to Boston to kill me. But I think space, from a crowdsourcing standpoint, has really taken the imagination. And of course, I think it's possible because the first thing that really did take our imagination was the SETI at Home project. Right.
Yes, and that's going back a number of years, and even really before computers, even people were sharing tapes and things. I think, if I can remember my history correctly, I haven't looked at SETI in a long time. I'm not, but I know that was definitely a crowdsourcing thing that was going on, for years and years and years. So
apparently, if I remember correctly, it's still going on. They
very well might be.
Oh, it's still going on. They just change data sources.
Right.
They change the client program. And they use what is a very, very good basic method. Take a big problem, chop it up into small steps, and then spew those steps out to separate computers. And it's a method we know very, very well because we use it all the time in computer parallel processing. It works the same way.
Absolutely, and sadly, without result yet. So
no. We've had a lot of parallel processing.
Oh, sure. I meant SETI. They haven't found any extraterrestrial life yet. No. Right.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I was going to say, if I had missed that announcement, I think we all would know that one. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's certainly worthwhile, and I don't mean to, and I certainly don't mean to poo-poo what SETI's doing, because again, it's not always about finding extraterrestrials and aliens talking to each other, even though that's their, their sort of big picture. A lot of good science comes out of that just from listening to radio waves and things. So, it's definitely a worthwhile pursuit. Somebody's out there, and well, I think the exoplanet thing kind of goes in the hand with that, right? There's no proof of any planets beyond our solar system for X number of years, and then all of a sudden we've sort of there's been a few. There was one, there was two, there was a couple, and then there was three, and then all of a sudden it's been thousands, and that's happened in a very short span of time. We've gone from 0 to thousands, and I think that's helped a lot with expanding our idea of what our galaxy really is like, and not just in a planetary sense either, but in a sense of just the sheer complexity of how it's put together is starting to take shape. And I think all of these things sort of work hand in hand with building a better picture of how that sucker works.
Oh yeah, and now as Mayor said, and this may not be directly germane to the issue, but 15, 20 years ago, oh yeah, we know a good bit about the universe. We know a whole lot. Now, yeah, we know what about 4% is made of. Really honest, we don't know what dark energy and dark matter is. We know that it's there. We know that it's there. We can see what it is doing. We have no idea what it is at all.
No idea.
And so that means we have no idea what like 90% of the universe is. That's just amazing.
Yeah.
It's
a little intimidating saying that, but it's true. Yeah, we have no idea how it mostly works. Right?
Very much so. Very much so. Yes. And what was fascinating with His Holiness's talk in FanFest this year, and this is utter fantasy. I know this, but he was hypothesizing subspace, the hyperspace links, etc., and all that is based on finding something that we don't know exists yet. Right. And so I sat there going, God, this could be really interesting if 400 years from now, this is called the Charles White Hyperspace Drive. And he turns out to be right. Because the issue is that for hundreds of years, we looked at Newtonian physics. And Newtonian physics was fantastic. It was good enough for comets, moons. It was good enough to get us a spacecraft in a hole-in-one on Mars. Fantastic. Yeah. And then we figured out Einstein figured out Einsteinian physics. Very, very different. It didn't invalidate, per se, Newtonian physics, but it was something that took a little extra into account that Newton didn't know was there. And what was fascinating about that is one of the tests, of course, for Einsteinian physics is, especially general relativity, is the fact that time moves slower inside a gravity well than outside a gravity well. So time at the base of the mountain is slower than the top of the mountain. Our old GPS infrastructure works because of that. What's funny is that when they launched the first GPS rocket, there was still enough of a debate as to if this would work with or without Einsteinian physics that they installed a switch in the satellite.
Wow.
Off, it wouldn't take general relativity into account. On, it would. They launched it off. They launched it with the switch off. They took data. They found that the distances were, 80, 100 meters off. They flip the switch, goes down to 1 meter.
Wow. Amazing.
And what's fascinating to me is they built the rocket for this purpose, and there was still enough people going, it might not work. We should figure out another test to do that. And they did, and they put a switch in, and the test worked.
Yeah, it's amazing that, it was a theory for a long time because there was no observable way to prove most of the assertions in the theory. And then, you start it started a little bit at a time, right? Like, the gravity lens thing with the planet, the stars affecting. So that was kind of like, hey, there's some aspects of this that look like it's kind of true. And then, more and more as we've gotten a little bit further along with things like the GPS satellite situation you were describing, that, more and more of these pieces seem to fit. But, your point is valid, is that, Newtonian physics explained, it's sort of like big child blocks, right? It explains the big blocks, and then moving at a slow speed. Right, the world around us, as it were. It's like it was great for explaining the world we could observe and see and touch with our hands. And then Einstein comes along, and he's like, well, there's a different way of thinking about this. It's not really invalidating Newtonian physics, but it's kind of explaining it at higher speeds and larger distances and more massive objects like planets and stars, and then there's more to it. There's going to be more to it, and Einstein even knew that. It was driving him crazy, even into his later years, that he knew there was more to it, but he just wasn't capable of seeing it. And
partially because he didn't like quantum physics, but then very few people liked quantum physics back then.
Right. I mean, that was a very hard concept for. I mean, you can only think.
It's a hard concept now.
It is, and people are only so smart, and we're trapped by the things that we've grown up with and the lessons that we've learned and the knowledge that we have. And no matter how intelligent or genius you are, but there's those little bits at a time. Different people thinking different things, and we'll figure it out sooner or later.
Well, different people thinking different things and being able to prove it. I mean, there are a whole bunch of strange things with quantum mechanics that don't make any sort of sense. But the problem is that if you take this thing in quantum mechanics that makes no sense in the macro world, and quantum mechanics says, yes, this doesn't make sense, but if this happens, this should happen over here, and you do the test, and the other thing does happen over there, a whole bunch of our electronics, we wouldn't have television if we didn't have quantum mechanics. So to some degree, we don't exactly understand how television works, but we know that it does work, and we know that if we do this, this, and this, it will work, and it works because of the statistical oscillations within the atoms, on a quantum level.
Right. Even though we don't know exactly why it does it or how it does it. But but we know it does, and that's good enough for now. Right.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Yes, this atom can go through a solid wall. Well, that makes no sense. Yeah, it might make no sense, but it actually does it. And I can actually show you how.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it's just really strange.
It's possible that tachyons are going faster than the speed of light, and yet we've not been able to capture one of those. And there's a lot of things like that that seem to be actually happening, but yet we don't know why. And a lot of that is the same problem we're having with dark energy or dark matter, or however you want to describe that, is that we know we can see it, we can see its effects, we can measure it, and yet we still don't know exactly what that is. So at all. It's a kind of exciting thing, though. I mean, because if there is so much left to be discovered, then that means there's so much more progress that can be made. So it leaves, especially in light. Let's bring it back to Eve for a moment, and what your point was about Charles's thing is that yes, there's still a huge gap between where we are and where we will be someday, and we're not that close. And a lot of people. When I was years and years ago, you hear rumblings of, perhaps we've learned as much as we can, and there's always that, right? Like there's nothing new to discover, and that's kind of always been a silly thing. But it's nice to see that there's still a lot left, a lot of things left to go yet,
Well, they tried to close down the patent office at one point in the early 1900s or the very late 1800s. I don't remember which. Right. But literally, the guy in charge of the patent office wanted to close it down because there was nothing left to discover. And you look at that and go, wow, how wrong could you have been?
Yeah. Imagine the audacity of saying something like that at any point in time. Well, we're kind of done now.
Yeah.
Shut
We're
down all
done.
those, we've learned all there is.
Close the doors. Close the doors.
Right.
Yeah, that was it. Thank you. It's been fun.
People are human beings, man. They're kind of weird, but
Yep.
that's cool. So have you been party to a discovery of an exoplanet then, or
No, not
no?
particularly. I've supported some tests on exoplanets, and I've been operating some robotic telescopes that some students have been using in order to figure out and detect exoplanets themselves. Get basically more confirmation on exoplanets, and
Nice.
it's not just okay, yeah, we discovered the exoplanet, it's there, thank you. You continue to get data on it because that refines a whole bunch of things that you can know about it, like its diameter, the year, its distance from the sun, even how warm the darn planet might be.
Right.
You can
I was going
detect.
to ask. I was going to ask you about that too, because it seems like lately that we've started to hear about some exoplanet detection of gases and things that make up the atmospheres of some of these planets. And how is that? How is that happening? Like how? That's what I think
That's happening. That's our next big thing. That's
Right.
going to be spectroscopically analyzing the atmospheres of the sun and the planets. We are just on the very edges of being able to do this. And really what it's going to take is another satellite in heliocentric orbit around the sun
Right.
that is built for this. And what
Okay.
happens if you get a planet that is going around its sun and transiting its sun, when the planet goes in front of the sun, so you're seeing both the sun and the planet, you take a spectrographic image, and it
Right.
gets the spectrogram of both the planet and the sun. Good. You wait for the planet to go around the back of the sun, so you only see the sun. You take another spectrographic image of the sun. So now you have a spectral image of the planet and the sun and just the sun. So you take those images, mask out the sun, and then you just have the planet.
Gotcha. Yeah.
With spectrograms, you can figure out what is in the atmosphere, what is chemically in the atmosphere. And one of the things that we're going to be looking for is methane.
Right.
Because there are two things that make methane. Some geological processes and farting cows.
Right. Right.
So it's going to be
biological
an issue.
life. Right.
Exactly. So it's not going to be slam dunk. It's not going to be, oh my God, we found life. It's going to be, oh my God, this really could be something. So it's going to be the next step in the process.
It's a leading indicator that there may be something there worthwhile to look at.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
And
right.
we are just at the edges of being able to do that right now. And Dr. Mary actually mentioned that during the talk. We're just on the edges of being able to do that. And that's going to be the next big push.
It's crazy when you think about the distances involved and
Yes.
the amount of light that's getting here from there, which is minuscule, and that a star who is as massive as it is, and this tiny little object, no matter how large the planet is compared to the star it's circling, it's going to be small, and that way over here on the other side of the neighborhood, 175 million light years away or so, we can detect the light differences between those two objects that are passing in front of each other. That's crazy science is what it is.
It is, yes. The star wiggle that we started this process out with 20 odd years ago, we can detect the wiggle of a star. It's going forward and back in comparison to us. It can do that as slowly as you can ride a fast bicycle, and we can still detect it.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
It's amazing.
And it's only getting better.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I have to think too that there's some of these. Well, there's a lot of talk right now about artificial intelligence and how that's going to be changing the world and robotics and things like that. But as far as artificial intelligence goes, I think that's probably going to be a huge boon to this kind of science as well, because this is the kind of repetitive data mining that human beings are great at, but computers are not so good at right now. But at that next level of, artificial intelligence, that sort of cognitive behavior that can be machine learned, we'll be able to go through this data like crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Of course, we'll get drove out of that, but you take the good with the bad.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, we won't worry about it, but our kids won't have jobs because the robots will be doing all their jobs. So I keep hearing that, which jobs are safe from robots, and there's not very many of them on that list. So
no, we're really going to have to. It's not something we want to do at all, but it's something that we're going to have to really think about economically in the next 50 years. Really, our kids are going to have to be pioneers on just so many different levels.
They
and
really
I just
are.
hope we're really preparing them for stuff that we can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I won't be here for it, so they're on their own. we kind of had to make our own way. They'll figure something out. Yeah. Yeah, that's one way to look at it, I guess. We won't be here for the...
As an astronomer, I like to tell people, you're worried about global warming? Let me talk to you about global warming. 4.5 billion years from now, the sun will swell up and swallow the Earth. Then you'll have global warming.
Yeah, I mean, it's all for nothing, really, isn't it? I mean, we're doing all this, and then boof, the world's gone. So, but hopefully by then we've moved on to another world, and we're spreading throughout the galaxy. Yeah, we're having huge intergalactic fights, and then then we open up a wormhole, and then we go through that, and then the wormhole collapses, and then we're stuck in a star cluster in another galaxy, and we have to rebuild. And I already have some ideas for names for the factions, So, yeah, that's kind of where.
What's nice about that? What's nice about that mythology is that we did do it. We didn't do it perfectly. There are 4 or 5 factions out there that love going pew pew, killing hundreds of millions of people in keep stars.
Right.
But as a race, we did survive.
So tell me a little bit about what's going on in Eve with you and Startide, and you said you're just moving down into Nullsec then. Yeah.
It was the story of Startide to some degree is the story of the structures. Interesting. We started Startide good while ago, and it was just me and my partner, to be honest with you.
Right.
And it was a holding corporation, and it stayed that way for a good while. And then at one point in time, they of course released the Citadels, and those Citadels, they look fantastic. So we said, okay, we're going to put up a Citadel. And we did that. It's funny as hell. We did that. It onlined, and as it's onlining in Ria Dayed, so high sex, so we weren't all that brave.
Right.
I see this guy, just orbiting the Citadel, and I said, so hi, and he said, that's a nice Citadel you got there. Would you like to join my alliance? And I read the guy's name. I just couldn't believe it, just off the cuff. And then I'm looking at this going, Commander A's. Didn't I vote for you in the last CSM election 2 years ago?
Right.
Oh wow. And that actually happened, and we actually were part of that alliance link until about 2 weeks ago, and there was a change in leadership for Startide, to be honest with you, and there was at that point the cracks showed up, and Startide wanted to go in another direction, and Link wanted to go into direction B, and both parties. It happens.
Yeah, it
and
does.
What was nice is that we parted very, very nicely, and so it wasn't get out. It was okay. We realized this, so good luck, and yes, you good luck, and then Commander A's loses the CSM election. We're all going damn.
Right.
And one of the things that at that point the current leadership for Startide really was interested in is the not read, don't shoot philosophy in Pravi.
Yeah.
And
right.
So we started hanging out a little bit in improv. We really were high sec slash low sec, maybe just getting in touch with that corporation. And we thought, okay, mining in Pravi low sec. Oh, that would be interesting. And so we started trying it. And very soon we'd have people, saying hi on comms, and it was just much more friendly than we expected it to be. And about a week later, we were getting alliance offers, and to some degree, maybe that made sense because, okay, not red don't shoot is fine and all, but if you're going to stay here, we want to be part of the family.
Sure, absolutely.
And a few days ago, we finally chose ULI Federation, and we're in the midst of starting to make some waves and integrate there. So it really is jumping into a very deep end of the pool, but it's a small corporation. But the small core of it is extremely active.
Right.
What was interesting, as a matter of fact, is that just before we came on here, I had just left a corporate meeting where we were fielding the possibility of buying Fortizar.
Oh wow! Wow!
And go, oh my god!
Wow!
So it's very, very interesting.
It's a new adventure though, so it's pretty exciting.
Very new, very adventurous. Yes.
I always say to people, you got to try new things and explore. And you won't know unless you try, right? I mean, it's a game. There's nothing to be lost. You're never going to lose anything, not other than time, and you won't regret it if you try. Just try it. See if it works.
I think trying something like that is especially in this environment is extremely valuable. I will say, Rixx, that in the 2 years that one of my characters was CEO for Stay Frosty Industries,
right.
The other character being Frank Kameny, I learned more about conflict management, etc.
Right.
Management, anything
right.
that I ever did in quote unquote the real world. I'm sitting.
Oh, absolutely.
How do I put this on the resume? Someone's going to, if I put down, Stay Industries, someone's going to look at that. I'm going to be caught.
Yeah, but I've had this conversation before with others in Eve and in the community, and both in real life and in game too. And it is true that the skills that it takes to manage, both, the scale doesn't really matter. It could be 10 people in a corporation, or, in my case, 800 people in an alliance. But the skills it takes to manage that and keep that going and keep it vital and keep people engaged, it's the same skills that it takes to do that in real life. There's no difference in it, really.
It's actually hilarious at one point. Over the last 4 years, I have been completely taken with Eve. Everyone at work knew that. I've named ships after some of my colleagues.
Right.
And they're highly amused by that. One of our webmaster a couple of years ago was a very, very big gamer. Big gamer. I'm going, you've got to get into Eve. And he would look at me and say, no, I already have a job.
Right.
and then at one point he resigns.
Oh.
And so it's 2 weeks notice, all that, and I go over and say, yes, this is perfect. I'm going to send you a corp invite right now. And he looks at me and says, no, I already have it. Oh, damn.
I got rid of his excuse.
Yes, exactly.
That's hysterical.
Exactly.
All right, Alan. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about exoplanets and stuff. You have any last words you'd like to leave us with, or last thoughts that we didn't get to round to, or anything?
No, I think I'm actually looking at my notes.
Okay.
And
I know you made notes, so we'll make sure we
did things.
We did a pretty good job of covering it, I think.
Yeah.
All right, excellent.
Oh yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me in the lounge, even though we're in low security space.
That's fine. That's fine.
Not as bad as everybody makes out, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and I hope everything works out for you in NullSec.
Thank you. I do have one question.
Sure.
I'm looking at the cigar and it's labeled Cuba. Is that Mimitar?
It's definitely Mimitar. Yes, it's
Okay, there we go.
a very good cigar, wrapped in between the
Yes,
thighs
it
of
is.
virgins. Yes.
Yes, exactly. It's been a while.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much, Rixx.
Thanks, man.
Bye bye.